Thanks. Nick, thank you for the nice introduction. Thanks for the invitation to be here tonight to talk to all of you. I appreciate it very much. I hope you are able to have me back sometime when I can talk about something else that's near and dear to me, and that's the issue of gun violence prevention, something that I've been spending a lot of time on. But it's really good that we're here tonight to talk about climate change. It's, I think, one of the most important issues that face us as a people today. And there's no greater long-term threat to us and to our future generations than climate change. And I just wanted to list for you some of the reasons why I say that. And you don't have to take notes. I can make this information available to you if you haven't already seen it. But by the end of the century, and think about this, 84 years, and that's not too long. And the older we get, we realize how short a time span that is. But scientists expect seas to rise 1 to 4 feet. 1 to 4 foot rise in sea level, and that doesn't sound like much, but if that happens, more than 1 million people worldwide can expect to see their homes submerged or put at very serious risk for regular flooding by the year 2100. And many of these people won't have anywhere to go. So they'll become refugees and with no protection under international law. And what that does, it moves people around looking for new places to go. And what that does is cause wars, cause conflicts, and cause wars. It's a financial issue as well. If coast cities don't adapt, sea level rise will cost upwards of $1 trillion by 2050. $1 trillion. And it's also a health issue. Increased temperatures and associated droughts, storms and floods all lead to a growth of disease. We're already seeing a global outbreak of this around the globe. And right here in our own district, a rise in sea level brings salt water into the delta, which millions of people depend upon for drinking water. A big portion of our congressional district includes Solano County and Contra Costa County, cities there that draw on the delta for their drinking water. It's also one of the reasons why this twin tunnel proposal by Governor Brown is of concern to me and probably anybody else who lives in Northern California. And we're already in an extreme drought, and we cannot afford less water to drink. And then even here in Sonoma County, we're seeing the fallout from sea level rise. And all you have to do is go down to Highway 37 between Vallejo and Sears Point, and you know that they're having severe problems down there, and the projections are that part of that road will be going underwater in the very near future. And that's expensive. That's extremely expensive to rebuild highways. And you know that corridor has been a problem for a long, long time. And the reason that we put the K-rail down the middle of it was because we couldn't afford to build a new highway that provided adequate safety provisions, and there were a lot of people being killed on that road. So how we respond to climate change will not just define our generation, but it will determine the security and the well-being of all future generations. And if you want to know the scope of the challenge that we face, listen to these numbers. America spends $200,000 per minute on foreign oil. $200,000 per minute on foreign oil. More than $25 billion a year goes for Persian Gulf imports alone. And the problem is, like most things in Washington, climate change has become incredibly politicized. And it's probably redundant to say that. I mean, everything in Washington is incredibly politicized. But the disagreement on climate change goes one step further on the political spectrum than on other issues. On issues such as poverty, terrorism, economic development, job growth, Social Security, Medicare, and any of the major policy issues that we deal with, Democrats and Republicans always agree on one thing, that there's a problem. just disagree on how we solve that problem. But on climate change, many on the other side of the proverbial aisle deny that a problem even exists. And I listed some things I want to share with you here and what some of the leaders on the Republican side of the aisle have to say about this subject. Ted Cruz, number 2 in the polls, the Republican nomination for president. Quote, global warming alarmists are equivalent to flat earthers, end quote. Marco Rubio, number 3 in the polls, by some polls, I guess. Response to climate change is that, quote, government can't change the weather. And thank God she's no longer in Congress, but she didn't go away completely, and she's still influential. But Michelle Bachmann says that it's all voodoo science. And Donald Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, said it's all a hoax because there was an ice storm in Texas and it was cold one day when he was in Los Angeles. You can't make this stuff up. You know, I mean, this is the real deal. And even the chairman of the House Science Committee, Lamar Smith, is a self-described climate change skeptic. So that probably explains why on Capitol Hill they don't refer to the Science Committee as a Science Committee. It's referred, and not kindly, as the Unscience Committee. And I'm not joking about that. That's the real deal. So it's really hard to find solutions when the other side won't even admit that there's a problem. And however, the fact of the matter is climate change is very real and it's very much established science. And President Obama during the State of the Union said, if anybody still wants to dispute the science around climate change, have at it. You'll be pretty lonely because you'll be debating our military. Remember I talked about the fact that increased sea levels bring about conflict and war. You'll be debating our military, most of America's business leaders, the majority of the American people, almost the entire scientific community, and 200 nations around the world who agree it's a problem and intend to solve it. And I would add to that, just coming off my 8-year term on the Intelligence Committee, you'd also have to debate the Intelligence Committee because they're very key to this and they spend a lot of money trying to figure this out because they're at the tip of the spear on these areas that become political hotspots and areas for war and conflict. So I'm telling you that we need to do something about it before it's too late. We're already experiencing the impacts. 2015 was the second hottest year on record in the United States history, and for 19 years in a row now, the U.S. has experienced temperatures that exceed the 20th century average. And the last year alone, there were 10 extreme weather and climate events with losses exceeding $1 billion. And 2 of them were right here in our home state of California. Drought, which we all have been experiencing, and hopefully we get a little respite from that with this rain, and wildfires. And you have to look no further than another part of the 5th Congressional District, Lake County, and I think it's all too current and too fresh in our minds how devastating that fire was. And you know, combine the wind with the dry conditions up there, and it was a very, very serious problem that we had, and a lot of people lost their homes. So I think President Obama was spot on when he said we're the first generation to experience the impact of climate change. The important part, the last generation that can do something about it. And that's something that we really need to take to heart. There isn't a county in America that understands this better than Sonoma County. So I'm not surprised that we had a good turnout today. Sonoma County has been on this, and they've done a fantastic job. We've been recognized nationally for our Sonoma County Comprehensive Energy Project. And as you know, the project has 3 goals: reduce greenhouse gases, save money, and upgrade equipment. And on all 3 of these, the county's batting 1,000. It's been cost neutral since day one because utility savings more than cover the financing of the equipment. And in fact, over the equipment's 25-year life expectancy, the county is projected to save $38 million. And we will reduce carbon emissions by 6,135 tons per year. And the Sonoma County fleet operation was selected by EPA as a Clean Energy Excellent Award winner, and that's a big deal. It's an award that recognizes the honor and honors innovation efforts to help make progress in achieving cleaner air. We also have some of the nation's most successful property-assessed clean energy programs, and Sonoma County is clearly the leader in that regard. That's the PACE program. And as you probably know, PACE allows property owners to finance the purchase and the installation of renewable energy components to their homes and their businesses, and then pay for it each year as part of the payment that they submit on their property bill. And I think it's important to note that since Sonoma County started its PACE program, more than 2,000 commercial and residential energy efficiency and water conservation projects have been undertaken. And the county estimates that the retrofits have pumped more than $71 million back into the local economy, and that's supported almost 1,500 local jobs. And this is important now, but it was even more important during the recession. The PACE program in Sonoma County kept a lot of people working, kept a lot of money moving in our Sonoma County economy. But we all know that it takes more than just one county, one state, or even one country. This is a global issue, and addressing global climate change is going to take a global effort. And that's why I think the Paris Agreement was most important and comprehensive international action ever taken on climate change. It was extremely important. And think about it, 195 countries pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and work towards slowing climate change for the good of the planet. And they set some serious and fairly concrete goals, and I'll list them for you. First, the global temperature average should not be allowed to rise more than 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. And pre-industrial temperature was 0. We're now at 1. And we can't hit 2, I think you probably know this, because that's when it becomes irreversible. So this is a pretty important goal that they've established. The agreement calls for greenhouse gas emissions to be net zero by 2050, meaning that the emissions would be fully balanced by carbon removal. And the developed nations will help developing nations reduce their emissions. And that's an important thing to note. And it's as important on a global scale as it is here within the United States of America. You know, we have a lot of communities, we have a lot of states that are heavily dependent on things that really exacerbate the climate change issue. And to think that we can expect, you fill in the blank, West Virginia, Kentucky, to go this alone, it's not going to happen. We're all part of this great country. We're all part of this world, and we're going to have to figure out how we can all contribute to make sure that the burden doesn't fall too heavily on one state, one community, or one country, because that is an absolute recipe for failure. And the goals that I mentioned, I think they're real, I think they're meaningful, but just as important as the goal is the international acknowledgement that climate change is something that we all must address. And the United States, as you know, is already leading the way. Last August, the Obama administration finalized the Clean Power Plan, which requires power plants to reduce their carbon dioxide emission by 32% by 2030. By June of this year, states must submit roadmaps for how they plan to curb emissions, whether it's through increased dependence on renewable energy, upgrades to aging infrastructure, or improving efficiency, or innovative regulatory strategies. Now, not surprising, California is way ahead of the curve. We should all be proud of the fact that the governor represented us well during the Paris talks. And instead of a 32% reduction, Governor Brown has set an ambitious goal of 40%. This is on top of the state's established long-term target of 80% by 2030. So, as always, California is in the lead, and I think we should all be very, very proud of that. So Sonoma County is doing our part. California is doing our part. The President's doing his part, and the world leaders are doing their part. At least 195 of the world leaders are doing their part. Now we just need to get the majority in Congress to do its part. And as I said, that's it's tough to do. And the unfortunate truth is that since Republicans have taken over the House, we've fallen even shorter. When the Democrats had control of the House in 2009 and 2010, we passed 21 different pieces of legislation to address climate change. 21 different pieces of legislation to address climate change. And included in that was the American Clean Energy and Security Act of 2009, which was the first time either House of Congress had approved a bill meant to curb the heat-trapping gases that scientists tell us are linked to climate change. Now, last Congress, the one that we're just finishing up, with the Republicans in control, we voted on 3 bills. Remember, Democrats control 21 bills to address climate change. Last Congress, 3 bills connected to climate change, and I might add that they're loosely connected to climate change. Every single one of them was in response to a natural disaster like a hurricane or flooding. We had the Disaster Relief Appropriations Act to appropriate money for these folks who had experienced disasters, Hurricane Sandy Relief Act, and the Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act. It would have been bad enough had they simply done nothing, but the majority actually voted 45 times, 45 different pieces of legislation, unlike the 65 times on the same piece of legislation to repeal Obamacare. 45 different pieces of legislation to undermine efforts by the EPA to combat climate change and implement the Clean Power Plan. I just want to, that sounds terrible, I know. You're having a real hard time with it, but I just want to emphasize that, you know, just because it's an uphill battle in this Congress, and believe me, it is, and I know I go back every Monday morning and deal with that uphill battle, but it doesn't mean that we stop fighting, or we can just forget about it, because even in these tough times, we're able to get some good things done, and we have had some successes, and you don't have to look any further than the legislation that was signed last month by the President that extends the solar tax credit for people wanting to retrofit their home or their commercial property. Now, if you think that's worth clapping for, listen to this. That legislation was modeled after my New Energy for America Act that I had passed back when we were in control of the House. And I just want to point out that since those tax credits first took place with my bill in 2006, employment in the U.S. solar industry has grown by 175,000 jobs, and we've added a number of new solar companies, about 8,000 now, and a lot of that was attributed to the tax benefits that we were able to put together. And by 2016, we'll be generating enough clean solar energy nationwide to power 8 million homes. 8 million homes. It offsets 45 million metric tons of damaging carbon emissions, and that's the equivalent of removing 10 million cars off our highways and roads, and that's very, very important. And also, and I wasn't going to put this in my remarks, but I was asked by Nick to mention this, and so I will. But I think it's important to note that through a lot of hard work by a lot of very, very concerned folks, we were able to successfully create a couple of areas in the state that add, I think, to our efforts to reduce climate change. One being the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. And the other was we extended the Coastal National Monument to protect the Point Arena Stornetta public lands along the Mendocino coast. And what that means is that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of acres of beautiful land and rare plants and rare species that are protected forever. And this is important because this land will never ever be developed. It'll never ever be drilled or industrialized, and those lands will never contribute to climate change, and they'll always serve as an important reminder to future generations how important this is and how beautiful this real estate is. It wasn't easy establishing established in those areas. I first started working on the Stornetta property when I represented the North Coast many years ago, and on Berryessa I introduced the legislation to create that area in 2012, and Stornetta came to fruition after redistricting and after I had left Mendocino County, but under the very well-guided stewardship of my predecessor up there, Congressman Jarrett Huffman. He did a great job, and we made sure that that thing came to fruition. Berryessa took a little bit longer, although both of them were widely supported. All 5 counties within the Berryessa Snow Mountain region endorsed permanent protection for the area. There are more than 100 businesses in the area surrounding Berryessa Snow Mountain that supported it, and we had national organizations, national recognized recreational and sportsmen's groups that came out in support of it. And I think it's also important to note that all the studies showed that our economy would benefit from doing this, that local economies that surround national monument areas expand following the creation of the new national monument. Employment, personal employment, per capita income, all either continue on or they improve. They don't drop. So, a lot of people are saying, well, if we do this, it's going to decimate there. This is just not true. The data shows otherwise. Yet my friends on the other side of the aisle refused to even give our bill a vote. We had a hearing on it. It went no further than that. They wouldn't let us have a vote on it. But we made our case to the White House. The president understood it, and he stepped up where Congress wouldn't. And because of that, that region is going to be protected forever. And in March, we're going to dedicate the Snow Mountain area. There's going to be a big ceremony out there, so I'll make sure everybody knows when we're going to have it and where it's going to be. And I want to say also that I talked a little bit about the PACE program. I've had legislation in Congress, a couple of Congresses now. I think it's great that Sonoma has a great PACE program. I think every county in the country should. And I'm working with a group across party lines to figure out how we can change the regulatory and the statutory climate to make sure that happens. It's good for the environment and it's good for jobs. And then another bill that I'm working on, and I just introduced it again, bipartisan. It's a bill that would change the tax code to make it easier and to make it more attractive for private sector investment in renewable energy. It's called the Limited Partner Program, Multiple Limited Partner Program. And it's a great project. The historic energy folks are using it. All the gas and oil guys use it. I think it should be available for renewables as well. It'll create jobs. It'll strengthen our national security. It'll help our environment. It's just it's a good way forward. I want to point out, and I want to stress the fact that addressing climate change is an economic issue. It's also a public health issue, and it's a national security issue, and it's an issue on which the future of our planet depends. And I can't emphasize that enough. And during my time in elected office, including my time in the state senate, I don't think anything has really touched me quite as much as the visit we had last year from Pope Francis when he came and he addressed Congress. And the Pope spoke on many issues, and I suspect most of you heard what he said or read about what he said, but only once during that speech in Congress did he call on the Congress to take a specific action, and that's when he talked about climate change. And he called for, and I'll quote, a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. He said he had no doubt that the United States and that this Congress have an important role to play. And he called on Congress to remember that we're not in elected office just to take up space. I think that was a very, very powerful statement. We're not there to take up space, but we're there to work with each other to better our country, its people, and our planet. And from the county level to Congress, we're all in this thing together. Climate change isn't a problem we can put off and let our kids and grandkids deal with. If we do that, it'll be too late. or as Pope Francis put it, if we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. And we can't let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. And my call to action is not only to my colleagues, but to all of us. Let's not just take up space. We're better than that. No matter what political party we belong to, we're better than that. We need to work together to make sure that we can fix some of these problems that we face. And the good news is people are talking about climate change. The President and the Pope are talking about climate change. World leaders and the expert scientists are talking about climate change. You're here to talk about climate change. And that's why I'm optimistic that eventually the people in this country are going to demand that Congress meet its obligation and set ambitious goals and act seriously and substantially on climate change. When I was working on the gun violence prevention legislation, one of my colleagues, a great mentor of mine who's since left, George Miller, said, just remember, Congress is a place where great ideas come to die. Think about that. And it's absolutely true. You know, that happens. And he said, when you're working on this, he said, just remember, make your own weather. Make your own weather. This is too important. Don't let it just die. And that's what we have to do with the issue of climate change as well. America is best when Americans come together and work together to address serious problems. And nowhere is that more important than on the issue of climate change. Nowhere and no time are the challenges as great as they are right now. And it's going to be incumbent upon all of us, and especially you, to make sure that Congress isn't a place where our good ideas go to die. They need to be responsive. And you know, it's tough. I know it's tough because you can write your congressman. I'm there. You don't have to convince me. And when you email someone in another congressional district, I know what happens. You get a thing back that says, sorry, I'm not your congressman, take a hike. And it's very, very difficult. We've got to be creative. And on all these tough issues, when my colleagues are refusing to work together, we've got to figure out how to make our own weather. You know, you've got relatives in other congressional districts. You all belong to organizations that have chapters in other congressional districts. The doctors today asked me, I had a lunch with a group of doctors, and they said, we really want to help you on the gun violence prevention work. What can we do? You know, we're all from your district, but we feel, help us, what can we do? So, well, the California Medical Association is not from my district. That represents 58 counties in the state of California. And every one of those counties has somebody representing them in Congress. And you need to turn your organization on to the Republicans in California, because not a single one of them is a co-author of my bill on requiring background checks for people who buy gun at commercial sales. And the California, the docs, and 4 of them were past presidents of the California Medical Association. And they said, well, we support that. So you need to make sure that your members in every county know that, and when they go to talk to their member of Congress, talk about the medical stuff. This is a medical problem. When people are getting shot by guns, 33 people a day killed by someone using a gun, and who knows how many people injured, that becomes a medical issue. It's a costly, we're all paying for that. You need to make them aware of that. So let's make our own weather. Let's figure out how we convince people that this is the most important issue facing our generation, and that if we fail to do it, it's over. This is on us. We need to deliver. So thank you very much for being here, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
About half of all greenhouse gases come from automobiles and trucks. And another great deal of greenhouse gases come from the production of concrete for those roads and asphalt. It seems to me that in order to fight climate change, we have to convince people to get out of their automobiles, except that they don't have a way to get out of their automobiles. The infrastructure is not yet there. How will you be able to convince Congress to support more rail transit and more bicycle trails?
Well, first let me say, you're absolutely correct, and I'm not going to try and suggest that this is going to be an easy one. That's as tough as convincing some of my colleagues that climate change is real and that human beings contribute to climate change. And once you start dealing with rail, it gets very, very thorny. Look no further than our rail project here in, not in Sonoma County, because SMART is doing a pretty good job, doing a real good job. But look at our high-speed rail project, something that I suspect most people in this room agree we need to figure out how to have a rail system in California that works and moves people back and forth. Most people probably know that our roads through the Bay Area are over 30% to capacity, and even those who worry about the cost of high-speed rail also know that the cost of doing anything else, just the dollar cost, not the externalities that you mentioned, are expensive as well. If it's widening and existing roads, building new roads, new overpasses, new airports, all that stuff, it's very, very costly just on a dollar for dollar. And then if you add the externalities, the environmental effects of putting that many more cars on the road, producing the components to expand those highways and to build new highways, it gets even more expensive. But don't think it's going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while to do it. Some areas are more conducive than others because of the fact that, for instance, the people who live in Sonoma County understand the importance of doing that. Earl Blumenauer, my colleague from Portland, who chairs the Bicycle Coalition, or Bicycle Caucus, people in Portland understand that bicycles are a legitimate form of transportation. Sonoma County also, there's a big bicycle population, big bicycle community here, from everything from the manufacture of bicycles to the use of bicycles as transportation. My hometown, St. Helena, just took a section of town with bicycle lanes and painted the whole thing green to highlight the fact that this is important to do. My home county of Napa is in the process of building a bicycle trail the entire length of Napa County, and they hope someday to come over and join Sonoma County, and they want to run it down to Vallejo. Think about it. You can get on your bicycle at my house, ride down to Vallejo, get on the ferry, and go into San Francisco. And so that's going to be pretty exciting. So we're making a lot of gains. We just need to keep working on it.
Do you think we'll be able to extend SMART all the way?
Do I think I would?
Do you think we'll be able to extend the SMART train all the way to Shelbyville soon?
I don't know what the schedule is, but I think Smart Train is going to be a success, and I want to see it run I want to see it run further than it is now, and probably further than that is projected to run. I was there. I broke ground on the Cloverdale station, and I'd like to see in my lifetime. I'd like to see a train stop there.
So I have a million things I would like to say, but I won't promise. Let other people talk. There are two things I think are really important. Thank you, first of all, for being here and listening to all of us. And we three came over from Napa, so we really want you to do this in Napa too. The town hall on this. I hope you've got that in your schedule at some point. So the two things are this. One, the way that all the numbers that people have been using, the state of California, the governments that negotiated treaties in Paris, all the climate registries, and all of the other climate footprinting that's going on in the private sector are all using outdated climate science metrics. In other words, they haven't embodied and incorporated what climate scientists have learned about the real impacts of methane, the real impacts of black carbon, the real impacts of tropospheric ozone and other short-lived climate forces. They haven't got the map right. And until they get the map right, they're underestimating a lot of the problems. So you have major scientists like Dr. Drew Shindell, who I'm sure if you know any of the scientists, he was at NASA for 20 years as their lead climate scientist. He took over when Hansen retired. He's saying this stuff is out of date. We need to upgrade it. And it's time to introduce a more robust accounting metrics for climate into all of this discussion, because the end result is that we're underestimating, unfortunately, the problem, and we're not putting our dollars where we can have the most impact. We're not putting our dollars in the most cost-effective ways because we don't yet understand, because we're not measuring things correctly. It's just basic mathematics aren't adding up properly. So I can talk to you about that afterward, and I'd be happy to. I'm involved with international standards efforts on this issue and with national ANSI standards on this issue. The second, and maybe even more important point, and I hope this is a takeaway for you and for everyone who's here, is that you mentioned 2 degrees Celsius, the goal that was established both in Copenhagen a few years back and in Paris this time around as the goal, the threshold beyond which we can't go, and we're at 1 degree now. Well, when we hit 1.5 degrees, we'll be hotter than we've been in 10,000 years. We're heading toward a 4-degree world by the end of the century, and even with that goal, there's not an effective implementation plan in place. 4 degrees is a temperature this planet hasn't experienced in 12 million years, long before human beings were on this planet. We will be, in the current business as usual model, we will be at 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. And the reason this is the case is because the root cause of that temperature rise, that 2 degrees, that rise in temperature, global surface mean temperature, is radiative forcing. That is the trapped solar radiation from the sun, net trapped solar radiation. And there's a little problem, and that problem is that there's a time lag between the time that the solar radiation, radiative forcing levels are reached and the temperature that they cause occur. It's like when you turn a stove on and you turn the heat up, it will boil, but you know it will take a few minutes before it will boil. But you know when you turn that stove on high that it will boil sometime down the road, a few minutes later. We have turned up radiative forcing to 2.3 watts per square meter today. That's enough to drive the planet temperature over 1.5 degrees, which many people think should have been the goal established in Paris. And within 5 to 10 years, not 35 years, not 2050, within 5 to 10 years, because of many problems, because of methane, because of black carbon, because of the cleanup of sulfur dioxide and sulfate aerosols, the coolants, because of all the things that we're doing, we're going to hit 2.6 watts per square meter within 5 to 10 years. And if that level is sustained, that necessarily bakes into the climate 2 degrees. We have to do the actions we're going to do in a much faster time frame than our politicians and our treaty negotiators have been willing to admit. It's politically inexpedient.
Okay. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do mean to cut you off. Let me clarify one thing. I'm not a scientist, and
but I work with scientists.
Okay, I'll stipulate everything you said is true. I'm not a scientist, and I wasn't asked to come and give a scientific dissertation tonight. I was asked to talk about the politics of it. And as much as you know about the science, I think I know about politics. And I make my living counting votes. And I tried to give you a realistic view of what's happening and how difficult it is. And I thought it was pretty clear when I named all the top Republican leaders in the country and what their position is on this. The chairman, Republican chairman of the Science Committee, what his position is on this. And that just gives you an idea, notwithstanding the up-to-dateness, if that's a word, of the data, with the outdated data, we can't get these guys to move. So it's a huge political issue. I'm willing to stipulate to the scientists, the people who know that far better than I do, the science of it. And whatever that science is, if it's what the outdated numbers that you tell me that I used, or the updated numbers that you use, it's still a tough political push. And we just...
Yeah, please don't take anything I said as a criticism.
No, I'm not.
Anyway.
No, I'm not.
There's got to be some way for the politics, the real politics of this situation, to match up to the real dilemma that we're facing in the time frame that we have to face.
Yeah, and I tried to give you an idea how that happens, and it's going to have to come from the ground, and that's why it was so important that we did this Paris negotiation, because this just puts, it just puts it at a different level. No longer is it, the Green community and the Sierra Club and a couple of progressive members of Congress talking about it. This is 195 countries in the world talking about it, and that's big stuff. And I know that for a lot of us, you think, well, whoopee, there's some goals that were set, and that's lofty. We need some action, but you don't get to action without taking these first steps. And I'm glad that we got to where we are. And I'll tell you also, and I tried to emphasize that, we need to keep going. We can't give up. We need to keep working at it. So, yes. I can't hear you.
I have a political question for you. Given the Paris agreement that were reached, how much steam do you think that might take out of the climate deniers side of the equation as we move forward? And what do you think might happen if a Republican gets the White House?
If who gets the White House?
If a Republican gets the White House, how much ground would we lose in terms of the...
I think we lose a tremendous amount of ground, because then the bills that were introduced to decimate the president's energy plan, we no longer have the backstop at the White House to veto those. They become law. So it would be a huge setback in every regard. I guess I talked about the monument legislation that we're able to accomplish. Theoretically, another president could reverse that. It'd be hard to do, and it's never happened before, but it could happen. You've got a very active movement in Congress of folks who want to sell all the public land that we have. And look what's going down in Burns, Oregon right now. You've got a big part of the population that's trying to promote the idea that America has lost all this private land to the government. Ironic that it's the refuge in Burns, which was established under Teddy Roosevelt's tenure, but it's been around there for a long time. But there's folks that do want to unwind that. We fight that battle every day in Congress today. We want to get rid of all of our natural resources.
And the other part of that question was, do you think that the negotiations, the consensus that was reached in Paris, takes some of the steam out of the climate deniers side?
No, I don't think you're going to. But I'll tell you this, and you probably watch it more closely than I do. But from my vantage, it seems to me that a little of the steam has gone out of the denier side. America doesn't seem to be on the side of the deniers. I think the congressional leaders who are just a little slow to catch up to where America was. It wasn't that long ago, if you recall, there was, and I don't remember the name of the organization, but the scientists who were rebutting the real scientists on climate change. They had a big book that was published by, out of the oil companies and the cigarette companies and all the, There was some connection to the cigarette company. I don't remember what it was. It was the same company, same scientist. But the deal was you could become, and they touted it. They said, we've got 3,000 scientists, and you had to have a science degree to be listed there. You had to have like a Bachelor of Science. You had to have the bar wasn't real high, but that seems to have dissipated a bit, and I think that's a good thing. And so whenever you have 195 countries come together and say it's a problem, we need to do something about it. When you ever have Pope Francis come out and say, get to work, quit taking up space. People hear that. The religious community is more focused on it now, and we just have to keep, as I said before, we just have to keep making our own weather, and we've got to make this happen. Yes.
What are you hearing from the business community in, say, California, though?
I think most businesses understand it. The established business, I read you the quote from President Obama. There's a long list of businesses who understand this. And there's you don't have to look any further than Sonoma County. Look at what Kendall Jackson is doing with their battery stuff. And I don't think there's a winery in Napa or Sonoma or Lake County that doesn't have solar panels up and not doing environmentally appropriate things. And I know that I sell my grapes to 2 different wineries, and if I'm not willing to grow my grapes organically, I don't sell my grapes. And I was doing it before I met them, but I think it's the right thing to do. But that's their standard. So it's not just me; it's anybody who comes along.
I have 2 questions. One is the hopeful sign of 12 Republican members of Congress signing onto the resolution by Chris Gibson to recognize that climate change is real, human-caused, and requires Congress to act and do something. So how you might work with that. And the other is, out of Paris, the launching of the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition that involves business, nonprofits, and government, and how you see pricing carbon as opposed to regulating.
Yeah, I think it all helps, and I think we have to look at every strategy to figure out how we deal with it, and pricing is certainly one of them. The 12 Republicans is a good sign, and there are some Republican districts that believe this is a problem, and these folks need to be empowered to do it. Bad news is Chris Gibson's leaving Congress. This is his last term, but he's going to run for governor of New York, and I don't think you run for governor of New York as a climate change denier. So, yes, ma'am. I can't hear you.
For your support for labeling genetically modified.
For what?
Labeling GMO food.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you for your support on doing that and for helping with protecting the Snow Mountain Wilderness area. Also, just wanted to also thank you for your continued support of the federal agencies that work in our area. We really value them. I think they're doing a great job. Really hope Congress supports them full-heartedly and every way they can, because they have a very difficult job carrying out the laws that Congress passed. But we really appreciate your support of them. And then the only other thing was, I think you mentioned methane, and you probably are aware of it, but it's a huge, huge greenhouse gas, and the food industry is a big part of that, and so we need to be really careful of what we promote in our food system in terms of the methane generators and big CAFOs. So that just on your radar, we appreciate any support you can give in Congress to bring in some of the methane.
Thank you. I always get nervous when someone stands up and says, I want to thank you for doing something good. I had a town hall meeting in Mendocino a few years back, and the first question the guy said, I want to thank you for the money you got us to do this trail. I appropriated some money to incorporate this area into a walking trail, running, biking trail. And he went on and on and on how important it was. It ties the community together. Oh, tourists are going to use it, the locals, on. I found like, okay, I get it, you're welcome. And he said, but when are you going to have the courage to put an end to earmarks? And I said, well, the money I got for the trail was an earmark. So whenever someone starts with a compliment, you think, okay, when's that other shoe going to drop? Yes.
Hi, Congressman Thompson. Liz Yeager, I'm the Energy and Sustainability Manager for the County of Sonoma.
Did you see my post with did you see my Facebook post with a gingerbread?
I looked for the gingerbread house, but I didn't see it. So
You're in it. You're in the picture.
all right. we had a really fun event in our building, and the Congressman stopped by, so it was great. But anyway, my question is about electric vehicles, known as mobile storage or whatever. A little context, Sonoma County's been very out in the front with installing electric vehicle charging stations throughout the county. We've kind of bumped our nose on the fact that there really are no building standards for electric vehicle charging stations, and there's some real questions about kind of standardization of accessibility around that, which has kind of slowed our progress. But that being said, I guess what my question is looking for those bright spots. I'd like to look for the bright spots in Washington. Are there different agencies that you feel are just kind of on the edge of tipping over to the light side, away from the dark side, that with a little special ask or a little extra attention that you could see us, maybe the Department of Transportation or whoever, are there some that you feel are just on the edge of moving over that somehow we could partner in getting them over to the light?
I think the agencies are probably pretty good. Okay. I don't think there's a problem under this administration. Now, that changes if there's a different administration, but I think that the EPA and the Department of Energy, all those folks are working in the right direction, doing, I think, a good job. Here's your picture.
Do you want to tell the story?
Right on my...
Nobody knows about it.
What I want to do is I want to replicate that. And I've talked to my staff about it. What they did is over the holidays, they had a contest to do a gingerbread house. A green gingerbread house, and it was incredible. They had was it your contractors who did it? Your client?
Well, we piloted it in our own department to see how it would run, because we would like to do this out in the community, either with schools or with our PACE contractors or something. We had the people in our department build sustainable gingerbread houses. So they had little water capture systems and encapsulated baby
compost pile. They had it all. It was fantastic. Solar panels, yeah.
But it all had to be edible. So very creative, and we had a little contest. But we would like to replicate this. So
and my only question was, were they eaten?
No, we decided that probably we'd have to have different health practices involved in the actual before we would allow people to eat them.
I wanted to know if anyone ate the compost piles.
With the gummy worms. That's a good point, though. I wrote that down. How do we replicate stuff?
I want to do that. I've tasked my staff to look into it, because I think over the next holiday season we ought to do that, and we ought to figure out how to partner with you and maybe do a contest.
Leadership Institute. Yeah.
I'd like to see every county, all 5 counties in the 5th District do it. Thank you all very much. Thanks.